Hello, my name is David Powell. I'm a copper wheel glass engraver. I was trained in the West Midlands at a company called Powell Copper back in the 70s under the tutelage of Mr. Kevin Andrews. Now, Kevin has himself done a number of videos which can be found on YouTube which give a more detailed account of certain aspects of copper wheel glass engraving. What's become apparent on the forum is that some people have never heard of what copper wheel engraving is. They like the end results, but they don't know anything about it. And whilst you can find videos of it being done, what I haven't found is anything that actually explains how it all works. So that's the purpose of this. It's a very basic introduction. So what is copper wheel glass engraving? Oddly enough, it involves a copper wheel. Now these copper wheels, and this is the largest of the wheels that I use. It's a panel wheel, it's quite thin. The size and the shape of the wheel denotes the cut. So at the moment this has got a sort of soft edge on it, so you get sort of a very sort of fine furrow into the glass itself. Smallest wheels, that's, believe it or not, does have a small amount of copper on the top. That obviously hasn't been mounted that small, it's tiny, it's been worn down that way. The smallest sort of wheel that you perhaps want to mount would be something around that size, and then it would be worn down during the process to the smaller wheels which you'd use for the finer details. Here's another example. This is a wheel I've recently put on. That's a small copper wheel, and again that would wear down quite nicely and eventually would be used for the very fine detailed work. Now of course copper won't cut glass, we know that, it's too soft, but because it's soft and because it's very malleable, it's an ideal substance in order to be the carrier for the cutting agent, and the cutting agent is this. It's a very, very fine powder. There we go. That's a emery or a silicon-based carbide. It's graded in microns. When I first started, we used quite an aggressive emery, mainly because you're mainly just trying to get into the usage of the wheels. So at this stage, it doesn't matter. So 280, still very fine, but it gives you a good level of cutting abrasive, and it makes it that little bit easier. The heavier the grade, the easier it is. Up to the one I've just shown you, that's a 600 grade, very fine powder. The powder itself won't, again, do the cutting because it needs a lubricant and it needs something that will allow it to adhere to the wheels. So we use paraffin, which is the lubricant, and then we use a vegetable oil, although other oils are used, I believe, but I go by what I was taught, and vegetable oil mixed in a 50-50, and that creates a paste. Obviously the emery will settle to the bottom, so if you need more emery, down to the bottom. If you need just the fluid, you just take some of the fluid. The corn oil effectively bonds it to the wheel, the paraffin is the lubricant, and the emery is the cutting agent. The copper being soft, initially there's no emery embedded in the copper and the wheel can skid, so quite often you have a piece of glass at the back of your lathe that is of no value, that you just do a couple of quick cuts, that's referred to as a try, and that will then embed the emery into the surface of the copper wheel so that you can then progress into cutting the piece that you're working on. It's quite messy, it gets in the way, makes it difficult to see. On the upside, it doesn't create any dust because it's a liquid, so it just falls onto the floor. So it's probably the safest of all the decorative methods on glass because there is no dust. We'll talk about the lathe in detail a little bit later on, and also the actual getting from the copper wheels to the into when they become available to use as a tool.